Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I wanted to chat with you because I keep hearing the words soccer, World Cup, football. I've been hearing them all over the place. And it kind of got me thinking, as marketers, what should we be thinking about, especially, us as an agency? How can we help our brands to engage this, very passionate group of people? Um, I've never seen a passion quite like soccer fans. My dad is a huge soccer fan. He roots for FC Cincinnati. He roots for Juventus. Did I say that right? Juventus? Juventus. Thank you. Who better to talk to about soccer in general and what brands should be doing than the two of you? So I know you guys as fellow coworkers. I know you as media and marketing experts, but I also know you both to be very avid soccer fans. Dare I say passionate? Would you call yourselves passionate soccer fans?
For sure.
I can be, yeah.
I would say you are. I feel like I hear you guys talk about it a lot. So with that said, I guess the best way to start would be a quick introduction of each of you guys. And then I would love to hear a little bit about your first connection with the sport. Why are you passionate about it? Where did it start? Because from what I've heard, just like with a lot of other sports, it starts at a young age, right? And maybe it didn't for you guys, but I think that would be a good place to start. So maybe a quick intro and then just what sparked your interest with soccer in general.
Well, I'm Bill Brassine, Vice President of Media at Brandience. Been here 20 years. And I would say my first exposure to soccer was as a kid. I played all sports. My parents had me try everything for the most part. And this was the one that stuck for me. Played through high school, had some opportunities to play small college, but decided that I didn't want to juggle that and academics in college. So I gave it up and then got back into it from a coaching perspective. Probably about 7 or 8 years out of college, and then did that for a couple of years at the high school level, and then took about a 10-year break from that while my wife and I started having a family, and then got back into it probably heavier than ever once my kids started playing. And I currently coach high school in Northern Kentucky, and then am still very involved on the club level. So
Great. And for you, Ryan, I think you had mentioned when we talked about this before that it kind of started at a young age for you too, right?
Yeah, I'm Ryan Grant. I've been at Brandience for 3 years, and I'm a digital media associate. So I handle all of our digital, advertising, our programmatic advertising, and our social media advertising. Same exact thing. My parents wanted me to try more or less every sport I could at least once, just to get an idea of what I liked and what I didn't like. And soccer was one of the few that did stick. I basically played throughout my whole childhood. And around middle school, I think it was middle school, it was like fifth, sixth grade, I decided to switch from football to football, and didn't find my way back to soccer until about my sophomore year of high school. They threw me in the net, which was nice because some skills from other sports. I played baseball, so playing outfield and infield was somewhat similar in some senses for some of the skills that goalies need. Tracking balls out of the air, making sure that they don't go through your legs and end up in the back of the net. So I did that. And funny enough, that same group of kids that I had grown up playing with when we were younger was the same group, more or less the same group as when I joined back up in high school. And it's
so
awesome.
Nice.
It's awesome because it's the same group of friends that I hang out with almost every weekend, actually. And I still play in an adult league on Sundays, and 3 or 4 of those teammates are the same ones I had in high school, and those are the same ones I had when I was in fourth and fifth grade. So it really does
seems to be a very common experience with the sport. I feel like I hear that a lot, that it starts at a young age, and that I actually have read in a few places that it's good to not only target from a brand perspective at the, the national or regional level, but don't forget about the local level, right? Because there's so many youth programs and community programs and things like that that brands can get in on, at an early stage, because the fandom it seems to be lifelong, would you say?
I would agree with that.
I think it tends to be for sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. Well, I'll hold off until you go through your other questions. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the common term that you hear in the soccer world is for local, hyper local is grassroots. The term grassroots all the time. So there's a lot of marketing and branding opportunity at that grassroots level, and it's usually very inexpensive. The problem that you just run into with that is if you're a regional or national brand, to get in on the local level is easy, but to make sure you're not leaving anybody out, because like take Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky alone, there are probably 20 to 25 plus what I would call youth grassroots, whether that's recreational or club level soccer. And if you really want to truly cover the market, then you got to do that effort times 20 or 25. So it can add up quickly, but there's no better place in my mind that is more impactful than it is at the grassroots level, because that's where the passion really, really, really lies, in my opinion. And that's where you're getting kids at a young age and hooking them for many, many years to come. So
yeah, and also Ryan had mentioned in an earlier discussion about this that there's, geo-targeting options of an entire field, because as you guys know, when you're at the field, you're probably thinking about dinner, or, you're thinking about the sunglasses that you need because the ones you have just broke, or you're thinking about purchases that you need because of where you are. And who makes those purchases? The moms and dads that are there as well. So you're not just targeting those,
right.
You're not just reaching those younger audiences, but the parents as well. But just to kind of like take an aerial view of this topic, why, in your opinion, would you say brands should care about reaching soccer fans?
I think the most important thing is that soccer is it's an always on sport. So whether it's international play or club play, or it's American or European, or you're playing yourself at that local level, there's always a game to watch, or a team to cheer for, or a training session, or a practice, or even just getting with your friends and shooting around on, your local field. On top of that, it's also just one of the more simple sports to watch and enjoy from a fan's perspective. I mean, you watch American football, and I can't count how many times I've been in a group of people and somebody goes, "I have no idea what's going on," or I don't know the rules," or a flag gets called and they're like, well, "What is going on?" I mean, don't get me wrong.
That's me asking those questions.
There's always going to be some really niche rule, but I feel like at its base, soccer is kick ball, get it in the back of the net, and that's really easy to get behind. And a lot of people are just crazy about it. And if you can build a genuine connection and integrate your company or brand into those teams and become a part of the beautiful game, I really think that brands will see great results.
Yeah.
Just adding on to that, I would say, I mean, I don't have all the statistics at my fingertips, but for years and years and years now, it has been the fastest growing sport globally. Well, in the United States. I mean, it can't grow a whole lot more over, in Europe and Asia and places like that, because it's always been the number one sport for hundreds of years for that matter. But in the United States, it has been the fastest growing youth sport out there. So that's reason number one, in my opinion, that you can't ignore it, and that you need to be, at least acknowledge it if you have a brand that is, doing anything from the standpoint of youth sports or even just sports in general. But then the other thing that I agree with Ryan 100%, it is one of the very few sports I can't honestly think of any others other than maybe golf, and a couple others that is truly 365 days a year.
Right.
Without a doubt. I mean, and the other interesting thing is there's not many sports where the fan engagement of leagues overseas is as just as big, if not bigger, than it is domestically. So, for example, there's many, 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 many other families that literally, wake up on a Saturday morning at 7 a.m. or Sunday morning at 7 a.m. to catch the English Premier League or the German Bundesliga, things like that. And, I know people that have, and myself included, that have gotten up at 3 a.m. to watch World Cup games based on the time difference, things like that. So
Wow.
it is truly a 365 day a year sport. And I think that also brings a lot with it. So.
Did you get the outcome you were hoping for when you woke up at 3 a.m.? I'm just curious. Because if you're anything like my dad, who's a huge FC Cincinnati fan, oh man, when FC doesn't do well, it's not a good day. Can you relate to that, Bill?
I honestly don't remember if I mean, I'm trying to remember what World Cup that even was, but it was to watch the U.S. men's national team, and odds are I was probably frustrated.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense, right? Because the fan base is passionate. You want your team to win. And speaking of the World Cup, we talked about the 94 World Cup, right? And how, I don't want to say adoption, because that's more our terminology, but the sheer number of people who started playing soccer, especially I think the stat that I'm thinking of is in women's sports, it went up like exponentially, like 45% or something like that. Would you say that with this upcoming World Cup in the US, should we expect a surge leading up to it, as well as, as far back as right now, knowing that we're a whole year out?
First of all, I think that the World Cup being, and it's not just the United States next year in 2026, it's the United States, Mexico, and Canada, which is the first year that they've done a multi-country host, and based it on a continent as opposed to a country itself. I think it's long overdue, that for it to have been since 1994 to 2026. But I do think, going back to 1994, I know me personally, that was when, I mean, I was already in the thick of my high school playing. I remember my first real big World Cup that I watched probably every game I possibly could, was the 1990 World Cup in Italy. There was so much excitement when they announced 94 coming to the United States. And I do think that had a huge impact on the growth of the game in the United States. And I do, it's continued to grow and grow and grow. I do think you'll see another bump, if you will, in 2025 and 2026 and even 2027, just as, the difference between 94 and 2026 is, in 1994, not every game was viewable. Not every game was broadcasted on television or cable. There were just key games that were available. But now, with streaming and everything else, every single second of every single game in the 2026 World Cup will be accessible to fans. So I think that alone is also going to help get the casual fan more hooked than ever. My goal is, by the end of 2026, Desi, for you to be as passionate about it as Ryan and I. So I expect you to watch it.
I'm getting there. You guys are convincing me for sure. And I know it's a totally different landscape, to your point, than in 94. And I'm just wondering, because of that, what would you say brands should be doing now and in the next year to kind of prepare for the World Cup, if they're planning on reaching these fans?
I would just say, there's numerous different ways to look at it. There's obviously, big brand national type plays, that are going to be huge probably $billion corporate sponsors that are, going to be tied in from an event standpoint, in the stadiums and on television and, multimedia type faceted programs. And then you're going to have, your regional or local brands and how can they get involved. I still think that, with the World Cup coming, it's huge, but I still think that probably the more advantageous, at least place to start for local and regional is at that grassroots level. And then if they have dollars available to somehow tie, I mean, really and truly, the only way you could tie locally would be through buying, local spot television or local spot cable, or streaming, of course, as well, to have a presence inside the game. I will say, though, I mean, television advertising or any kind of video advertising inside soccer is it's a whole different ballgame as well, because you don't have timeouts. You have one natural stoppage in extended stoppage in play, and that's halftime. So it's not like American football or, basketball or baseball where you have a ton of commercial breaks, which allow for a ton of commercial inventory. It's totally different on the TV side. So, however, it goes back to that passion. And, I can't tell you how many times I've tuned into a soccer game after it's already started. 95% of the time, I'm probably tuning in 30 minutes ahead to hear the commentary and things like that. So, that stuff is that inventory, that television inventory before the game and just after the game is very, very valuable, just like it is at halftime.
I can piggyback off of that because I completely agree that soccer is unique because there isn't a lot of, like you mentioned, commercial opportunity. However, I think kind of loops back to what you were saying about the difference between 94 and now, because I think a lot of people kind of do this dual screen approach where you might be watching the game, but you're also glued to your phone because fans aren't just into the game. They're also looking for that commentary, those reactions, those highlights. And speaking from experience, when you're a fan of multiple teams in different leagues, well, if you only have one or two TVs, it's hard to watch multiple Premier League teams at the same time if you play fantasy like I do, or if you have a favorite team in Italy versus England versus Germany. Well, you might be watching the England league, but you might be on your phone checking the scores and the stats and the highlights from the German and the Italy league. So the Italian league, pardon me. So there's opportunities there to target on social media or YouTube to catch those fans that maybe missed the game, or like I said, they're using that dual screen approach, and you can target them in those ways outside of the regular viewing experience.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I mean, leave it to me to be more the traditional guy, imagine that, and Ryan to add in with the digital enhancements, which is exactly why we work well together. But no, you're dead on. I mean, that's where you can pull in on the social side of things, because, Ryan's absolutely right. I that's probably the heaviest, I'm not a heavy X user or Twitter user, but when I do use it, a lot of times it is while I'm actively watching, and it's not just soccer, it's any kind of sporting event. Just to see reaction and things like that. But I mean, my favorite day of the year in terms of the English Premier League is the final day of the season. They call it Decision Day. I think it's what they refer to it as. And that is when they play all teams are playing at the exact same time. And the reason they do that is if there is anything that can happen that can affect the outcome of another game, they don't want, if a team has already basically won the league or finished in the top four of the league, they don't want them to basically give that game away and make it mean nothing, so that everybody's playing at the same time. And that is definitely when I'm looking at my computer, I'm looking at my phone, I'm looking at my kids that usually have 4 TVs brought into the room at one time. I mean, it's like it looks like NASA. It looks like
March
NASA.
Madness for soccer, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a very good point. And the World Cup is very similar to that because there are a lot of games that are happening at the same time. And it's very, very similar with the World Cup as well, for sure.
That's so cool. And I heard too that they're expanding the number of teams, right? It went from 32 to 48 or something like that. So you're going to need more TVs.
Yeah. And I have mixed opinions on that, but which we won't get into all the specifics on my thoughts there. And I'm sure Ryan does as well.
And speaking of which, do you guys have brands that stand out to you that are really doing it well. They're reaching, maybe it's you, maybe it's Bill, maybe it's your kids. They're making a difference, and they are understanding the culture behind soccer and really speaking the language. Is there a brand that comes to mind?
Well, I would say one of the things that works for me anyways, and this is coming from a media guy, this is kind of interesting, but the ones that stand out to me the most and that work the best for me are the ones that actually invest and put their messaging into the game, or I should say put the game into their messaging, into their creative
Mm-hmm.
messaging. So like, for example, I mean, and I know that, not a lot of your local and regional brands are going to have budgets to create a special, whether it's a commercial or any kind of ad campaign that is specific to a sport, or, a sport, and that it's only going to run in that sport. I get that. But then you obviously get into these big global and national brands that, will create a single TV spot to run one time if it makes strategic sense, because they have the deep enough pockets to do that. But the
Yep.
ones that stand out to me are, a lot of your larger athletic brands like a Nike. The one that I think of that I see all the time, almost too much to the point where I get sick of it, is New Balance is a
Mm-hmm.
brand that does not, it's not real well known in the soccer world. They do manufacture and have soccer equipment, cleats,
Mm-hmm.
regular clothing and gear like that.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, when they think of soccer athletic brands, they don't think of New Balance. However, New Balance has done a great job, and they don't do this just for soccer. They do it across all sports, and they have specific creative that shows up, that has not only big name athletes that are contracted with New Balance,
Yep.
but they have multiple personalities in these commercials, and they're playing a game in the commercial themselves. Nike does it as well, does a very good job of it. Dick's Sporting Goods does a very good job of it. And the other one in the beer category is Michelob Ultra. I mean, they made all kinds of press when they had their special spot that came out with Lionel Messi back, and that actually launched in the Super Bowl. But now the only place I see it is in soccer games,
Hmm.
where he's on the beach and playing soccer. But anyways,
Yeah, I
so
think I've
those are
seen that
just a
one.
few. Those are just a few, but there's more.
What about you,
So I
like
mean,
from on a personal level, as a traditional media expert? Would you say there's a brand or even an ad that you've seen, like whether it be out of home or a radio spot, or anything that comes to mind? And it's okay if not, I was just curious.
I mean, honestly, it's the ones that I was just mentioning.
Yeah.
And the one it's when, it's just like with anything. I mean, if you can make your creative messaging tie into the content that it's running in, it's going to be that much more impactful anyways. So,
Right.
but I would say all those ones I just mentioned. I mean, there's others. I mean, I don't want to dominate the conversation, Ryan, if you have any.
I don't have any brands, but I know over the years there's been a few like specific spots or specific campaigns that were very unique and creative that did stand out to me. One that comes to mind is, and I don't remember what year it launched, but when Messi hit, it was some sort of record-breaking goal amount. I think it was Budweiser sent all the keepers that he had scored against either bottles of beer or cans of beer with the number of like which number goal he scored on them. So
Oh,
like some
cool.
keepers received 9 different bottles, one would receive two, and it actually had like goal number one, goal number two, and all the way to like
Wow.
690, like whatever. And to Bill's point, not every brand is going to have the budget or the means to
Yeah.
pull something like that off, but
But it's that
that
unique thinking.
Yeah.
exactly that really creative outlet. And I don't know the brand or the organization that put it out, but another one that really this one hit kind of deep is there was a
Hmm.
mental health awareness campaign or message that was going around, and it showed two fans sitting in the stadium, and the guy sits next down to his buddy, assuming that they're either friends or season ticket holders, and it's it is a male heavy field, and as we know,
Hmm.
men aren't the best about sharing their feelings or talking about mental health. And they sit down next to each other, and the guy's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, fine." And then like it shows next week's game, and it's the same thing, like, "Hey, how was your week?" And the guy's like, kind of okay." And it kind of shows like the team scoring and everybody around them, getting really hype and passionate. And the guy who you can insinuate is going through something and not talking about it is kind of just like, clapping. He's not getting as excited. And I think
Yeah.
that really creative way to loop it back into the game and relate it to things that that do happen.
It really resonated. I love
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah.
a great example.
Yeah,
Have you
I
guys
thought
seen? Go ahead, Bill.
I was just gonna say I thought of a couple others
Okay.
Ryan was talking, and I think the common theme is obviously the face of soccer to the casual fan in the United States is without a doubt. You have Captain America, obviously, which is Christian Pulisic, but then Lionel Messi is kind of the global face. But however, I would say that people like Ryan and I that are, so again, I always use the term soccer geeks. Um, we kind of get sick of those because there's so
Mhm.
many other quality players out there. Not saying that Messi's not great, he is, but
Not
there's a
as good as
lot of other
Ronaldo.
good. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other really good ones out there too. But anyways, my point is that just hearing him listening to him talk, when he made another comment about Messi, it made me
Mhm.
think, Lowe's Home Improvement has a whole campaign that they air during MLS games here in the United States. I see it during Premier League games on the NBC networks as well, where it ties the Lowe's brand into, I mean, he's literally wearing a Lowe's branded jersey on the field
Hmm.
in that campaign. And then the other one that has done a phenomenal job of it, they've even created a jingle, is Lay's potato chips.
Hmm.
And that's also utilizing Messi. And I think they've got some commercials out there that have more than just Messi. They have, with David Beckham in them, things like that. But obviously, a lot of people think of a soccer chant, and there's the whole. I'm not going to do it because I'm not going
Why
to.
not?
No, I'm
Come
not.
on, Bill.
I'm not going to perform on here. That's on this video that's potentially going to go out to more than just the three of us. But no, it's the one that ole, ole, ole,
Mhm.
ole, but they say olays.
Ah,
So it's actually they use the word lays in that
yeah.
chant. So I will not do that again.
Look at you, Lay's
Um
potato chips. That's
so
great. I love that
anyways.
example. One of the examples that I saw was Puma. I don't remember if we had talked about this or not, but Nike was previously the Premier League sponsor, and they dropped off. I think it was like 25 years that they were a sponsor. So this is, to me, from the outside looking in on this world, feels like it would be a big deal. And so I came across Puma's first ad campaign, or at least their first video campaign, where they're talking about, let's have a ball. Have you guys seen this?
Mhm.
I don't believe I have.
Okay, I'll share my screen because I would love to get your reaction on this ad campaign. I think it's a good one to highlight to kind of show how a brand is trying to enter the space, which is very what we're talking about here, right? Is how can brands do that if they're not already included?
Can you believe a Premier League player only has a football for around 109 seconds per game? That's mad, that is. So when you get the ball,
I'm having a ball.
have a ball.
My life is a
Get out of the way. There's Ryan.
and who knows how long this will last. I'm in the show. How I got stuck. And when it's all said and done, I'm just having fun. My life is a scream. I'm living the dream. I'm having a ball.
That's awesome. I've not
Yours.
seen that.
Yeah,
I
I
love
thought it was
that.
cool.
I think
I mean,
that
that's a perfect
ties.
example of integrating the game into your messaging. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean,
Well, I think it
that would absolutely capture my attention.
And I think
Good.
it ties directly into what Bill was just saying. If you are into the sport and you're so sick of just seeing brands try to utilize the big name players over and over, there was not a
Hmm.
single professional
That's
player
true.
in that commercial. That
Yep.
was, and if you're a player like me, I mean, that one clip was, I've done that before. I have caught the ball and rolled it out, and I am not
Yeah.
the person that should be doing that on the field. And so it's relatable. That was funny. That was a great commercial.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also really liked the part where there's a mom pushing a stroller on the side and you would think that she would be like, you know, who knows how
Right.
she would react, but instead she was like, "Oh, I got this," and she, kicks it back to them. So it was like a very all-inclusive commercial that I think could apply to a lot of audiences, and hopefully they're utilizing that campaign in more ways than just TV,
Oh yeah, for
right?
sure.
Because that could be a digital campaign
Hmm.
potentially, or they could take clips of that and make it a digital out of home board,
Hmm.
things like that. So
Again, super relatable too, because if
yeah.
you're, and I think Bill could speak to this just as much as I can, but if you're on a field, it's not usually just one field out in the middle of nowhere. It's usually 10 lined up next to each other. And whether you're good
Hmm.
at it or bad at it, when that ball rolls up to your foot, it is instinct to try to dribble it, try to pass it,
Hmm.
it is instinct to try to have a ball, like they were saying in the
Yeah.
commercial. So I think it
Yeah.
really hits home.
Yeah,
Yeah, and be
Desi,
careful because that song will get stuck in your head. It's been in my head all day since I watched it.
well, it's funny that I mean, you literally just taught us something. I don't want to speak for Ryan, but I was completely yeah, you did. I did not realize, and I just Googled it after you played that spot. I
Hmm.
did not realize that it's this upcoming season, the 25-26 Premier League season, that
Hmm.
Puma just officially ousted Nike. Because in my head, I was watching that and I'm thinking to myself, because my kids tend to always they literally come out with an official league ball each year, and
Hmm.
they do the same thing for the World Cup. But my boys always have to have a new ball each year. They want this year's official Premier League ball or whatever, and it's been Nike for decades, as long as I can remember. And I was sitting here thinking to myself when you first brought this up, I thought you were saying this happened a while back, but it just happened. So that
Mhm.
spot has got to be right fresh off the press.
Hmm.
That explains why I haven't seen it yet. And my guess is
Yeah.
we'll start to see it this weekend with the Club World Cup. Is it would be my guess. So,
Yeah, and unrelated to media, but it's been fun to work with Skyline on their FC Cincinnati
oh yeah,
ball.
Mhm.
How many years have we been doing that, Bill? Like, gosh, maybe
at
5?
least 5 or 6 we've done special soccer balls for them, and those are
Yeah,
obviously those are collectors things. Those are not meant to
right.
go. Although I have seen kids bring those to fields and play with them, but
Mhm.
those are definitely more for collectors. But
They're
yeah,
not like
that's a whole
regulation size.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, but I know this kind of goes against what we were saying, but they utilize or they partner with Nick Hagglund to promote
hmm
that ball.
Mhm.
yep,
So that I think that's a great execution. Very, very smart on their part to take I think he's a hometown kid, right? He's either
he
from
is
Cincinnati or has lived here for a long time.
from Cincinnati and
He
played his college ball at Xavier.
Yeah, yeah. He loves Skyline chili. And so that's a great example of a very authentic
Hmm
partnership. It's authentic to the audience as well, because they know that he loves Skyline and it just all the puzzle pieces kind of fit together. But I know we're coming up on time. I did want to talk with Ryan a little bit, pick his brain just a little bit about some digital aspects of this topic and how brands could potentially think about this through a digital lens. So let me pull up my questions here. We talked about impactful digital channels. You mentioned social media in general. You also mentioned YouTube, which I totally agree are two areas in my life that I'm heavily influenced by ads. I see them all the time. And so you had also mentioned programmatic display and OTT, and I'd love to hear more about how people who want to reach this audience can utilize those tactics.
Yeah, for sure. I think the great thing about programmatic and digital is that the level of targeting that we're able to access seems endless sometimes, which is fun for me trying to, put the pieces together and make sure that we're hitting the right audiences. But I mean, we really do have an endless amount of options to target. We could target based on as broad as just fans of the sport. We could target based on fans of particular teams. We can target based on fans of particular leagues. We can target even people who actually have, like still play or have kids that play, families that are, in or around those fields. We have geo-targeting abilities to hit recreational centers or even local teams like FC Cincy. We can target TQL, put a radius around it. And if we know that certain teams are coming to town, say Columbus and the Hell is Real rivalry, we can hit, fans of both teams when, they're at their most passionate points. Especially being in Ohio for a brand like Skyline Chili. We know that game is a big one and it comes around twice a year. And I mean, what separates Cincy and Columbus? Like an hour and a half. So you're hitting those passionate fans, basically all the time. And like I said, it's a year-round sport, so you're not hitting them just for a couple weeks or for a couple matches. I mean, fans of FC Cincy are likely also fans of a certain Premier League team, a certain Serie A team, and they might even be players themselves. So you have a ton of opportunity to hit them wherever they are, no matter what they're consuming, whether it be through display, reading articles on sites like ESPN or stuff like that, or if they're on YouTube, listening to podcasts, watching highlights, if they're on social media, interacting, we're hitting them wherever they might be when they're interacting with the sport, however they're interacting with it. Like I said, the targeting's endless, so we're following them wherever they are. It's a lot more effective to target that way rather than trying to pinpoint a specific site. So even if you were to target like only ESPN, well, there's no saying that you're only hitting soccer fans. You could be hitting basketball fans, baseball fans, and you have to be selective with it too. Because to Bill's point, if we're here in America, well, Premier League games are going to be on early morning. The Serie A games will be like early morning, late afternoon sometimes. And so it's a lot more effective to target them programmatically because we're following them where they are, when they are, versus trying to guess or shoot in the dark and miss them or waste media dollars on slots where they might not be interacting, with that particular sport.
Yeah.
I would say, just jumping in here from a consumer standpoint, social, I feel like is probably even more impactful because I know, like, I think about my social feeds. Now, obviously, Facebook, Meta in general, but my Instagram and Facebook feeds are loaded with targeted soccer related ads to me because I mean people are targeting if they're going in targeting, and mine are not just soccer equipment or soccer or or brands that are affiliated with soccer. Mine are things like as granular as different companies out there that target like coaches. I mean, I get probably 3 or 4 ads a day, and of course, I end up going down rabbit holes, and some of them are legit, and some of them aren't. But I feel like we could sit here and debate all day long the effectiveness of regular display versus social, but just the fact that from a targeting perspective, so much is known about every single one of us that quite frankly, a lot of us don't want that to be known, but it does make our consumer journey, I guess you could say, or whatever, or however you want to position it, a lot more impactful because I'm going to react to something that I'm interested in. And so, but yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, and mine and Ryan's feeds are probably very, very similar when it comes to that stuff.
I was gonna
So
say where you're talking about, Meta and Twitter, mine's TikTok because I'm constantly getting
Mm.
sports pundit clips as well as
yeah.
podcast clips as well as highlights straight from the game. And I get a lot of these third party sites because I play Fantasy Premier League, and so I get sites that have, weekly newsletters that update you on injuries and this player's average XG and all these kind of really nerdy stats that you need to pay attention to for Premier League. And like Bill said, we could sit here and debate the effectiveness of, programmatic versus social, but that's why we have a robust media plan that, surrounds
Right.
the consumer both programmatically
Mhm.
and on social.
There you go. I mean, that really is true, though. That's why we don't put all of our eggs in one basket, because they all have different ways of reaching the consumer, and they serve different purposes too, so
Mhm.
they complement one another. What would you say is a mistake that a brand could make in the digital space when trying to show up in soccer? I know we talked about, make sure you're authentic, right? Like make sure you're speaking the language. Is there anything else that you would say is like a good watch out for a brand that's wanting to reach this audience from a digital perspective?
I love this question because ahead of the World Cup, you're going to see it firsthand, is
Mm-hmm.
not understanding the nuance of the sport. So,
Mm-hmm.
the classic example is here in America, we call it soccer. Over there, they call it football. But
Mm-hmm.
not really grasping the difference between various leagues, teams, rivalries, and stuff like that. And with a lot of international, not just teams coming for the World Cup, there's going to be a lot of international fans that travel over here. So, when you're trying to target them and you're calling it soccer and you're calling the boots cleats and you're calling the pitch a field, if you're not using the right language, you're not going to hit them. They're going to know it's, disingenuous, or some of them might give you benefit of the doubt because they know they're traveling to America, but if you really want to make them feel at home and win them over, you need to meet them where they are and meet them with what they're comfortable with.
No,
Um,
that's a really
yeah,
good
go
point. I
ahead.
mean, I'm a heavy user of Sirius XM radio in the mornings, and it's because of one station, very niche station, Sirius XM FC, which is all soccer all the time, is the number one reason I renew that every single year. Again, did I say I was a soccer geek? Um, but to Ryan's point though, the morning show that I listen to and that I'm so heavily addicted to is it's called the football show,
Mhm.
and
Right.
this is a U.S. based broadcaster or satellite broadcaster.
Hmm.
And they know their audience. Their audience are geeks like me, and they don't. However, they do have some shows that are more mainstream and not as detailed and in the because that show covers globally. But and then they do use the term soccer though when they're talking. Like they also have a show called Summer Soccer Evenings, which is the
Hmm.
evening drive, but it's mostly focused on the domestic leagues and not the
Hmm.
international stuff. So knowing your audience, that's a very good point.
And I was
Yeah.
just looking at my notes, and another really great point that Bill had touched on earlier is, if you're a brand, you don't want to just focus on the 90-minute match. These fans are passionate, and it is a community. There's a whole pregame ritual, there's postgame discussions, there's podcasts, there's rivalries, there's player personalities, and we both kind of touched on it. If you're not in tune as to what is happening or the schedule that they're on, and you're trying to promote a player who's currently hurt or is currently sitting out for whatever reason, or you're only trying to, get in during those 90-minute matches, and you're not, in the social space during the match where people are talking about that crappy call the ref made or this player acting out or whatever it might be in those post game discussions, well, you're going to miss that community where they're having those passionate discussions, and you're going to miss out on building that genuine connection.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. You guys are the A team, to use the language. You are for sure just the best. And not only did I learn a lot, but I'm sure anyone who is watching and listening, I'm sure that they learned a lot too. I appreciate your time, and hope to see you guys again soon.